ties to terrorism? An official says one of the attackers in the San Bernardino massacre pledged her support to the Islamic State online. A pro-life push. The president promises to veto a Senate bill to defund Planned Parenthood. Why supporters say it's still a step in the right direction.
Wouldn't it be better for Catholics to put a Catholic in the White House, like Marco Rubio?
We sit down one-on-one with GOP presidential candidate Mike Huckabee. And top tweets. Social media lights up with Pope Francis in a trend that takes Twitter by storm. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, December 4th, 2015. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Brian Patrick tonight. The FBI says they are investigating the San Bernardino shooting as an act of terrorism. That statement as we learn one of the attackers posted an ominous message online during the massacre that left 14 dead. At some point while Wednesday's attack in San Bernardino, California was underway, officials say the 27-year-old female shooter, Tashfiq Malik, posted a pledge of allegiance online to ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi.
As of today, based on the information and the facts as we know them, we are now investigating these horrific acts as an act of terrorism.
Officials have not said how they know she made the post, only that Malik's statement was made under a different name and that the attacks may have been inspired by ISIS. Terrorism analyst Paul Cruikshank explains.
So this is a very significant moment, unfortunately. ISIS are going to take ownership of this, I would believe, in a big way. They'll use it to try and inspire other attacks. ISIS are instigating these kind of attacks over social media, reaching out to people directly in the West to encourage this form of violence.
Today, the landlord allowed the media into the couple's home with no objection from police. A look into the life of a couple that law enforcement sources say was self-radicalized. Though neither Malik nor Saeed Farouk had ever been in trouble with the law and were not on any watch lists. Their family also says they had no idea. Farouk's sister says she's not sure if she can forgive her brother.
Do you think your brother deserves to be forgiven?
That's a hard question. I don't even know if I would forgive him just because of what he did.
And we'll go back to San Bernardino in a minute, but first let's go to Lauren Ashburn for reaction from the White House tonight. Lauren?
Yes, here at the White House, Press Secretary Josh Earnest did not call it an act of terrorism. He did call it an act of violence. And he also said that this is a lone wolf operation, and lone wolf operations are difficult to stop. He also condemned politicians and pundits for talking poorly about our Muslim brethren.
The president has expressed his concern about some of the grossly irresponsible and in some cases outright bigoted political rhetoric that we've heard over the last several weeks. And the president does not believe that that is consistent with American values. He does not believe, importantly, that that makes the country safer.
Now, he was also asked if this is a failure of U.S. intelligence, to which he said it is clearly too early to tell. Back to you.
Thanks, Lauren. Ashburn from the White House tonight. Ken Sawa, CEO and Executive Vice President of Catholic Charities San Bernardino and Riverside Counties, joins us. Ken, what services are you offering the community in wake of this tragedy?
Well, we have a large counseling services department here in our organization. So the most immediate thing that we could do, because in the aftermath, is to make available free counseling services for anyone who is directly or indirectly impacted by the crisis, as well as we posted on our website some very basic but helpful guidelines and tip sheets for parents with children asking questions, for teenagers, and just overall sort of some steps that people can take following a critical incident like this community's just experienced.
So what's the mood there like in San Bernardino?
I would say there's a lot of uncertainty and a sense of insecurity, particularly because a lot of the the process by our officials hasn't been completed yet in terms of the reason for the shooting. And so there's I think people are a little bit on edge and just wondering what might be next.
And like I said, this shooting just happened Wednesday. What long-term needs do you guys anticipate for the community?
Well, I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together as a community and to heal. I think as far as the victims and the families of the victims, over time, sort of the longer term impacts of losing a loved one, perhaps a provider for the family and such, are going to reveal themselves, and then we'll be able to address those needs as well.
I know Catholic Charities does a lot of good work, and know that we'll be praying for you as well. Ken Sawa with CEO, Catholic Charities San Bernardino and Riverside Communities. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
The Senate votes to block several new gun control measures. One proposal would have required background checks for online gun purchases and sales at gun shows. Senators also voted against two proposals to stop gun sales to suspected terrorists. Now to some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The latest Republican push to reverse the Affordable Care Act is unlike any other. That's because the bill is actually expected to go to the White House. Democrats have blocked dozens of previous efforts to repeal or weaken the health care law. The Senate has already approved the latest measure, and the House is expected to pass it in the coming days. President Obama plans to veto the bill, but Republicans say that will give them leverage in next year's elections. Part of that bill included a provision to defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year. President Obama has already said he's going to veto it, but a pro-life lobby group says it's still a key step in the right direction to strip the abortion provider of federal funds. Jason Calvi reports.
The bill as amended is passed.
For the first time, the Senate approves defunding Planned Parenthood. The vote came down on party lines, with only two Republicans siding with the Democrats. National Right to Life Legislative Director Douglas Johnson lobbied hard to get the bill passed. Now he's looking ahead to 2016 to make it law.
This is now the bridge or the roadmap to how we actually change these policies with a pro-life president. We do need a pro-life president who will sign the bill.
Usually bills need 60 Senate votes to overcome a filibuster. This time, Republicans used a special budget procedure called reconciliation, which only requires a simple majority.
This now shows that it can be done. The trail has been blazed.
The bill cuts roughly $450 million federal dollars to Planned Parenthood, and it transfers the money to other healthcare centers.
Total waste of time here in the Senate. Everybody knows these two things are going nowhere.
But Johnson says lawmakers looking to attract pro-life voters are paying attention.
Republican senators who voted to defund Planned Parenthood are going to find that's an eminently defensible position. We're talking about a mega abortion marketer that pays its chief executive over $600,000 a year.
Planned Parenthood says the Senate gave its clients the cold shoulder. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Jason, thanks very much for that report. Gloria Purvis, co-host of EWTN Radio's Morning Glory, joins us now. Gloria, you've been involved in the pro-life movement for years. You're also a leader with Black Catholics United for Life. Why is defunding Planned Parenthood so important?
Well, number one, it unmasks the lie that abortion is health care. Authentic health care heals. It doesn't hurt, maim, or kill like what we see in abortion. And it's also an opportunity to take that $500 million that Planned Parenthood is getting and reallocating it to health care centers that offer authentic, comprehensive health care for women. This is a win for women.
Switching gears while we have you here now, obviously the shootings in San Bernardino has been on the minds of so many this week. Explain how communities of faith are so important in the wake of these tragedies.
Well, for me as a Catholic, as I look at what happened in San Bernardino, it's a reminder of the fallenness of this world. And since we're in Advent and we're preparing not only for Christ's coming as an infant, but for his second coming, it's a reminder to us to be prepared, to pray, to fast, and to try to love like Jesus loves. And you can only find that in communities of faith. And that's going to be a real place of support for people like me who are believers and understand that this is not our end game. This part of this world is not the end. And we're looking forward to something with hope, and that's the coming of Christ.
And speaking of hope, that's something that people need right now. On our other big story that's been gripping the nation, which is the video released in Chicago, that black teen that was shot by a white police officer, sparking tensions in the community. What was your reaction, and how can, I guess, communities kind of heal from this?
Well, number one, I think we have to recognize there's a complicated relationship with communities of color and the police. We don't want police to leave our community. We want them to be there to police us and actually protect us. So there's that to consider. And we have to recognize that not all police officers are bad. There are a few rogue ones that have done what we've seen in this case, and we'll see what the evidence comes out with, but it appears that the young man was shot 16 times and the officers weren't actually in jeopardy. But there's a challenge for us in the community to encourage the police, at the same time making sure we hold them accountable for actions that you wouldn't expect to see anywhere in the United States.
So many challenges out there, and obviously a good reason for all of us to pray.
Amen.
Gloria, Purvis, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Wyatt.
Women in the military can now serve in any role, including all forms of combat. That's the new order from the Defense Secretary. The Marines asked for an exception to prevent women from serving in certain infantry and combat jobs, but Secretary Ash Carter says his decision applies to all branches of the military. Family and friends are gathering today to mourn the police officer who was killed in last week's Planned Parenthood shooting. Garrett Swayze's funeral is taking place today in Colorado Springs. He was one of 3 people killed when a gunman opened fire. The suspect later surrendered. The United States is pledging more money to help the refugees who are pouring into Europe. Many are fleeing from war-torn areas like Syria. Secretary of State John Kerry says the United States is providing $24 million to help provide food, water, and shelter. He made the pledge today during a visit to Greece. Pope Francis is building closer ties with Catholics in the Philippines. Today, the Holy Father welcomed the country's president to the Vatican. The two talked about several topics, including a regional peace plan and global climate change. Pope Francis visited the Philippines in January. The country is predominantly Catholic. Coming up, in the wake of the San Bernardino shooting, faith leaders come together in prayer. And we go to Rome as the Vatican hosts a conference on women and work-life balance. Hymns and prayers at a candlelight vigil in San Bernardino, California last night. The San Miguel Stadium lights were dimmed as the names, ages, and home cities of the victims were read. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Muslims gathering at one of Southern California's largest mosques denounced the massacre. About 200 people met at the mosque in Chino Thursday night to send a message of, quote, love for all, hatred for none. In Washington, Muslim scholars are calling for reform in their community, rejecting Islamic extremism.
Muslim communities need to realize that all these acts have a commonality, which is political Islam and its supremacist mentality that at the last step dehumanizes Westerners and non-Muslims and reformers like myself.
Muslim leaders, community leaders are meeting this week in the nation's capital to discuss how to root out extremism in Islam. In the wake of the San Bernardino tragedy, politicians and faith leaders promised their prayers. But as Catherine Szeltner reports, those responses have ignited an unexpected firestorm.
After the shooting, prayers poured in from podiums.
But our prayers are with the families of those who were murdered, of those who were shot.
To social media. But those responses quickly drew criticism.
Our thoughts and prayers are not even close to enough.
What gives us the right to hold moments of silence when we do nothing to act upon the cause of the grief?
The Daily News headline yesterday, God isn't fixing this. Washington's Cardinal Donald Wuerl counters the criticism. He says, some may question the efficacy of prayer, but those of us who have experienced loss and suffering know from personal experience that God in His compassion gives us comfort and consolation. A popular online priest also shared his take. When a mass shooting happens, all 99% of us can do is pray for the victims and their families.
If you're a politician, or if you're in law enforcement, or if you're in social services, you can probably do something. But that's a very small percentage of us. The rest of us, especially those of us on the other side of the country, all we can do is pray. But look at their families and think about them. Think about praying for them. Ask the saints, ask Mary, ask Jesus to really help them through this difficult time.
Father Schneider says we don't always directly see how our prayer impacts others, but prayer is powerful and God does fix things. Wyatt.
It's a very good message, especially for our EWTN viewers. Thanks, Catherine. Experts from all over the world are meeting today in Rome to discuss women and work at a conference organized by the Vatican. Organizers say women play an important life in public life and in home. Participants are looking at solutions to help women balance work and family life, a challenge for many families. The workshop also commemorates the 20th anniversary of St. John Paul II's letter to women, which celebrated what he called the feminine genius. Erica Bakioki, who is taking part in that conference, now joins us from Rome. She is the author of Women, Sex, and the Church, A Case for Catholic Teaching. Erica, tell us what challenges women have when it comes to balancing family life with a career.
Well, it's interesting being here in Rome and listening to an array of speakers from across the world talk about different challenges facing women from different parts of the world. In the West, and especially in the United States, we see a real challenge because of policies in the workplace that are not particularly friendly to women who want to make caregiving of their children and or elderly members of their family or others that have needs, want to make that a priority in their life. And that goes the same way for fathers too, who are more and more wanting to take part in their families.
So what role does the church play in this family dynamic, and what are you hearing about that at the meeting?
Yeah, I think the church actually has a real pivotal role to play, in part because of the elevation of women and the place of the family, the importance of the family, the importance that the church places on the care of the family, the care that both women and men do in the family.
And when you think about church teaching on sex and marriage, it's not always easy to live by, but you've said in your book, they protect us from harm. Can you explain that?
In Women's Sex and the Church, I brought together several leading experts on sort of the most controversial teachings of the church on sex and marriage and abortion and contraception and women in work, etc. And we really saw, using sociological data, medical data, rational argument, not theological argument, but real rational argument, how all of these areas, all of these disciplines really corroborated church teaching and showed us that in straying from church teaching on these really controversial topics, on these controversial issues, when we stray from church teaching, we actually see that women are far more harmed, and the poor women are actually harmed the most. And when we really adhere to church teaching, especially with regard to marriage, with regard to life, we see that women really flourish. And it's something that has been corroborated by social science data and the benefits that children have in growing up with their own mother and father. And so I think the church has a great role to play.
Certainly a lot of interesting topics there, and ones at the heart of the church. Erica Bakioki attending the Women and Work Conference in the Vatican. Erica, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And Dr. Matthew Bunson of Catholic Distance University joins us here in the studio. So Pope Francis talked this week about calling for a revolution of tenderness. Is this something new, or has he talked about this before?
People are surprised to learn that Pope Francis has actually talked about this for a very long time. In fact, the first time he mentioned a revolution of tenderness was all the way back in 1994 when he was a young bishop at one of the synods in Rome. He sort of unveiled it, though, to remarkable acclaim just this year when he visited Cuba just a couple of months ago. And in the very plaza of the revolution, the Marxist revolution in Havana, he called for a revolution of tenderness. Now, what does he mean by tenderness? Yeah. What he's talking about is, in culture today, we think of tenderness as weakness, as being fragile. What he's talking about is being protective, caring, loving, having mercy. In that sense, then, he's asking all of us to start a revolution that emulates God's love for us as a father, but then helping us also to understand the maternal aspect of that too, of a protective mother. And where do we find the setting for that love and mercy? But in the church.
So do you think that this revolution of tenderness could be an antidote or a response, at least, to the violence that we've been covering nationally and internationally?
Absolutely. Francis is asking us to see each one of us, each other, starting with ourselves, as first in need of God's loving mercy and his care, but then seeing in each other the dignity of the human person. When we do that, it has a transforming effect on all of us, and then we carry that out into the world. Now, for people who think that this is some nebulous idea that can't really be realized, first think of the revolution under John Paul II that brought down the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. That was a revolution of tenderness. But also think of Pope Francis's trip just a couple of weeks ago, just a few days ago, to Africa. We're seeing the palpable results of a revolution of tenderness right there, in a place where hope and love were in very short supply.
You know, how do you think that this kind of ties into Francis with the Year of Mercy?
Yeah, Francis wants a revolution of tenderness to be a fruit of the Year of Mercy, so that when all of us go through that holy door, wherever we are, we come out transformed by God's mercy, carry that out, and see that tenderness, bring that tenderness into culture.
It is really interesting when we delve deeper into the language of tenderness. We appreciate your doing that for us, Dr.
Great
Matthew
to be
Bunson.
with you.
Thanks so much. Pope Francis trends on Twitter in the U.S. this week, but for an odd reason. Hashtag Pope Bars took over the internet. Tweets featured this image of Pope Francis on his trip to Africa. It looks like he's singing, even rapping. Bars is the common structure for rap songs. People wrote their own Francis-themed lyrics, adding the hashtag. One example, my beats are righteous, my lyrics Jesuitical, even Protestants go Roman when I drop my next encyclical. Up next.
Do you have a Catholic problem?
I don't think so. Not since
GOP presidential candidate Mike Huckabee makes a case for the Catholic vote with our Lauren Ashburn. The Holy Father praying with cardinals and bishops in the Vatican today. They're reflecting on the Advent season and Christ, the light to the nations. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is one of 14 Republicans running for president. But is he a candidate Catholics can get behind? Our chief White House correspondent, Lauren Ashburn, finds out.
Thank you, Governor Huckabee, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to bring to your attention something on Google. When I typed in Huckabee and Catholic, the very first story that came up was a story from Alatea that says, can Huckabee overcome his Catholic problem in 2016. Do you have a Catholic problem?
I don't think so. Not since 3 of my grandchildren are being raised Catholic, for one thing. And I have marched alongside of Catholics every year in the March for Life. I don't know that the Catholics have a better friend in the world of the evangelicals than in me. I can't imagine where that would come from.
Why is that? Why is it that they don't have a better friend?
Well, because first of all, on a couple of fundamental issues, the sanctity of life and the sanctity of marriage, there's no greater champion who believes that these are issues that are fundamental to our civilization and that they are foundational to our constitutional republic. And I've been an outspoken advocate not only for those issues, but also for the application of religious liberty. And I remember when the Catholic Church was under assault by the Obama administration for Obamacare. One of the things that I said at the Value Voters Summit, I said, when you attack Catholics, you attack all believers. And on this day, we are all Catholic.
And is that because evangelicals believe the same thing that Catholics do?
It is because of that, and it's because that even if we didn't agree on those fundamental principles and agree on the same version of them, the fact that we know that if I take your religious liberty away, then mine is at risk. For that matter, if we take away the religious liberty of the atheist or the Muslim, then mine is at risk. Religious liberty is not the unique domain of an evangelical or a Catholic or a Lutheran or of a Muslim. It's the universal domain of every American.
Why then wouldn't it be better for Catholics to put a Catholic in the White House, like Marco Rubio?
Well, look, I think you look not just at their denominational preference. I mean, if that were the case, then all the evangelicals in America should vote for me, and I'll be the next president. But it doesn't work like that. We need to look and say, what in this person's background, what skill sets does he have, possess, have experience in, and bring to the table that would mean that he could walk into the Oval Office and understand the nature of the job? I don't think the presidency is an entry-level position. I don't think the presidency is about making a speech. I think it's about making decisions. And if a person has no history of being the chief executive of a government and actually making those decisions where you have no legislative body to hide behind, then I think that that is a better qualification and a better prerequisite for determining what kind of president you're going to be than somebody who's been to some committee hearings.
Governor Huckabee, thank you very much for joining us on EWTN News Nightly.
Great to be with you.
You can watch a more in-depth conversation with Governor Mike Huckabee this weekend. Candidate Conversations 2016 with Robert George airs on EWTN this Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. More information can be found at EWTN.com/candidates2016. And we thank you for watching tonight. We'll see you back here on Monday. With the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Good night, and God bless.